I have a proposed resolution of the town board of the town of Greenberg authorizing the town tax receiver to refund interest and penalties in excess of 2% on late 2021 tax payments made by taxpayers after the April 30th, 2021 due date, and to reduce to 2% interest and penalties on late 2021 tax payments due after April 30th, 2021, but before August 1st, 2021, because of unique and limited hardships resulting from the global pandemic and software error that resulted in 1,454 tax bills not being mailed to property owners. I wanted to mention that if it was up to me alone, I would support a total waiver for anyone who did not receive their tax bills due to an error from a vendor that the town hired. I feel that the town is responsible for the mistake, and I think that from the standpoint of consumerism, we should admit it and not punish residents who have for many, many years relied on bills being sent to them. And this year, due to the vendor, this mistake or errors from the software, people did not get, not everybody got their bills, and I think that those people should not be penalized. I also believe that we should, though it may be too late for September, I think since they did make a major mistake, I think that there should be, that we should be rebidding that contract. And I also think that there should be a clause in the contract that in the future, if this happens, that the vendor would assume responsibility. I wanted to just ask Tim a question. Do we have any legal recourse? A lot of people, I've gotten, hundreds of calls and emails from people, and some people had suggested that the town should ask the vendor to, there should be some legal recourse against the vendor.
Yeah, so, first of all, I think it was described as a glitch or an error in the software, but we're not really sure what happened, and our own MIS person is not absolutely sure that it's the vendor's, fault. No one is saying it's the town's fault either, so we'd have to identify exactly, why this happened and what happened. And until we do that, it's, we can't really, find fault with the vendor.
But we know that it's either the town or the vendor. It's one of
Yeah, I think we know it's not the town, but, the question is it something that it was random or something that could have been anticipated, such that it could have been prevented? And I'm not really sure of that yet. I do have a copy of the contract, which I will review to see if there's any recourse against the vendor.
So I'd like to move the resolution.
Yeah. So, Paul, again, I just want to highlight that there's no question that if you do not receive a tax bill, that you are still obligated to pay your taxes. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that. And the question is whether or not the board, as a board, can waive interest and penalties if they believe it's in the best interest of the town. There is an opinion that highlights the fact that you do not get a bill is not an excuse, but there is a difference of opinion as to whether or not a board can make a determination that it is in the best interest of the town to waive interest and penalties, specifically when you don't get a tax bill, as opposed to other reasons that the board may want to waive interest and penalties.
But
I believe that the discretion is there. Others may not believe that, but that's the crux of the argument.
But you definitely believe that if the town would want to waive it, the town board would want to waive it, and we say it's in the best interest of the taxpayers, that legally we could.
If you articulate that in a resolution, that is my belief, yes.
Right, and I believe Also, we did waive interest for, right before the foreclosures. That was, at least once. You mentioned that we've waived penalties for affordable housing.
Yes.
In the past, so there is precedent, very rare for the town to waive, waive penalties, and the resolution that I've written would be very, very limited. It would only be in this situation where for people who are being impacted by a software, error. I just don't think we should be blaming, punishing the consumers, the taxpayers, when it wasn't their fault.
I'd just like to say that I'm very sympathetic to taxpayers who have been so busy and tortured and by the pandemic that they may have forgotten to pay their taxes. I do support the idea that there could possibly be some relief specifically for those people. However, I myself am one of those people and believe that because I'm one of those people, a vote that I would cast here could be seen as self-dealing, so I'm going to recuse myself from this vote.
Is there any second?
I'll have an explanation regarding why there isn't a second. Try that one.
Okay.
Isn't it there, can't you?
This is the first one.
Okay, there is.
I know, but it's
Go down and see if there's an error.
Can't you just make it bigger? It's up there. You can see it.
no, yeah, this is the first one. For
Oh,
some
I
reason, the
see.
second one's not downloading. Is there a way you can convert that to PDF and send it?
I think that makes the point. Focus on the first one because it makes the point that,
Right.
Try that. the one month. Okay? I'm gonna get the New York State at the top. That's it. Oh, and the other. Very good. All right. This has been a very difficult time, knowing how many people have been emailing us and telling us that it's unfair, it's definitely unfair. I think everybody. So it's been a very difficult time because we read the emails that you send us, and when you say that it's unfair, that you didn't get a bill, and you're being penalized because you didn't pay the bill in April by the deadline, which is established by law, that you did nothing wrong, and that why are you ultimately, as much as those of us on the board who would like to make a nice gesture to you and waive the penalties, we have to be guided by the law. And some of you even put into your emails, the law is terribly unfair. Waive the penalties. In other words, ignore the law. We don't have that option. And so what I'm going to do is at least, and you may not be happy with this, but at least show you what is the basis for our opinion that we can't just do whatever we want, hope we don't get sued, or do whatever we want because it's likely we won't get sued. That's not the way to govern. And so what you see here on the screen is from the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance. This is current, this is as of today. And it says, if a taxpayer didn't receive a tax bill, and then the payment was received by the taxing district late, does the taxpayer have to pay the late penalties and the interest that accrue? And the answer from our Department of Taxation and Finance is yes, parcel owners are not relieved of the obligation to pay property taxes due to the lack of a bill. I don't think anybody disputes that. Here's the kicker. There is no authorization in real property tax law to waive the penalties or interest. So here is our New York State Department of Taxation and Finance stating that the real property tax law provides no authorization in the real property tax law to waive the penalties or interest related to not getting a bill. Some would say we can use Section 1182 to state that it's in the best interest of the tax district to waive the penalties in this particular case. Well, that would be contrary to what the Department of Taxation and Finance says, because Section 1182 is in the real property tax code. And this clearly states that there is no authorization in real property tax law to waive the penalties or interest. If you go down. So, because it was so tiny at the bottom of the screen, I've reproduced in larger type what it says at the bottom. So we really don't have a choice. We can't use another section of the real property tax law to waive penalties involving a bill. We can use Section 1182, like we did in 2013, for the extraordinary situation where we had almost $30 million worth of outstanding taxes and liens. And there it was in the best interest of the tax district in order to invoke Section 1182. This one, by dealing with, and the Department of Taxation and Finance dealt with it directly, dealing with getting a bill. If you go down to there's probably a blank page, and then the state controller opinion. So this state controller opinion expresses our sentiments exactly. It says, perhaps you have experienced a situation where one or more taxpayers refuse to pay the interest due because they did not receive their tax bills on time. They may even send letters refusing to pay the interest and send checks covering only the taxes. Regardless of the reason, a collecting officer may not accept payment of bare taxes without interest, which is due. It is unfair, and this is it, as unfair as it may seem to the taxpayers, the law provides that the failure to mail a statement or the failure of the property owner to receive the statement does not in any way affect the validity of the taxes or prescribed interest. And they cite Real Property Tax Law, Section 922, Paragraph 3, which is the exact same wording as the time that this opinion was written. Also says, anytime a tax payment does not include the required interest, it should not be accepted. In other words, you can't make a partial payment. If we go down a little bit. So here, again, because the type was small, go down a little bit, Garrett. More. Right there. All right. Because the type was small, I highlighted the wording, and the underlying, by the way, is in the original state controller's opinion, underlining that the failure to mail a statement or failure of the property owner to receive a statement does not in any way affect the validity of the taxes or prescribed interest. If you look at our town website has a similar warning. On the town's website, which is in compliance with the Real Property Tax Law 922, Paragraph 3, and the New York State Controller's opinion, it says the following, which is written by the receiver of taxes, who is very much opposed to us adopting the resolution that's before us. On the website, it states, failure to receive a bill does not allow us to waive penalties for late payments. And that's based on the law. This is what it looks like on the town website. And it may be a little hard, if you can scroll down, maybe a little hard to read, put an arrow to it. That's where it says, failure to receive a bill does not allow us to waive penalties for late payments. And that's because that's consistent with the law. And that was written by Ann Pravella, who is our receiver of taxes. If we move down a little bit, we're not alone. The supervisor wrote to many other elected officials, chief elected officials of the municipalities. Some wrote back saying, we would love to do what you're doing if it's legal. And that's the question before us. There's a reason why the supervisor also put in that mailing is nobody else is doing this, but it would be good if we could do it. And I don't disagree with that. It's just where the disagreement here is on the board is the rest of us don't believe you can do it because of the law. And if you look, for example, at Yorktown, and I have it highlighted in red, it basically cites what is stated in the state controller's opinion. Neither the receiver of taxes nor any other official, meaning like us, have legal authority to waive statutory penalty charges. These are fixed by the real property tax law. I want to point out that we commonly get requests to waive penalties. One of the justifications in the resolution that was motioned without a second said that we're doing this because of the pandemic. This board has already turned down every prior request that was related to a pandemic. And I picked this one because it happens to be so recent, July 18th. And I've redacted names because the person who's writing it, trying to protect their person's privacy. It says, I am requesting the return of the tax penalty we paid for, and they give the address, for the tax payment due April 30th, 2021. I have been responsible for making payments. I have a neurological disease that impacts my cognitive abilities, worsening recently. I completely forgot that a payment was due by April 30th and did not check my folder. We are setting up a system to remind us of due dates to avoid this happening again. If necessary, I can share the letter from my neurologist excusing me from federal court jury duty due to my disease and its impact. And the supervisor wrote back, the state's controller office has recommended that we not waive penalties in cases like this. I'm copying the town board. And that's the standard response that we do. But now what's being proposed is because there's a glitch where somebody didn't get a bill, that we waive those penalties, even though it's not prescribed by law. Now, one of the things, if you can go down, please. One of the things that you may or may not know is our town website, and in fact, the software that some are complaining about right now, SCA, has an unbelievable amount of data regarding your taxes and your property so that you can, at any point, without a bill being mailed, know exactly how much your bill is, whether or not there are any outstanding charges or liens, going back to 2012. For those who see what I have up on the screen, again, I redacted, this is one of the people who did not get a bill. And by the way, when I asked our chief information officer how many people didn't get a bill, he said, I can't give you that number. There's lots of reasons why people don't get a bill. In this case, because of the glitch, we know that number, but we don't know the other causes. And the receiver of taxes said that it's routine for each time they send out the bills that at least 100, but it could be 200 or more, bills get returned as undeliverable, even though they have legitimate addresses. So there are lots of reasons why people don't get a bill, not just one. But here is an example of all you have to do is type in your name and the address, the street address, without drive or road or anything like that, and you will pull up everything that you need to know. And if there is a penalty, it's very clear, it's highlighted in red, so you would know that there was a penalty. Now, obviously, if you looked at this prior to May 30th, there wouldn't have been a penalty there. I point that out because some of you now are emailing us about penalties that you have that you didn't know about, that you received years ago. What's being proposed here, my screen jumped. What's being proposed here is solely for a small subset of the people who did not get a bill. If we can go down one more. So this is what it looks like when you put in your name. You don't need to know your account number because you probably would have to get a bill to know your account number. unless you remember from the previous taxes. But if you put in your last name, or if you put in your address, or if you just put in your street, it'll come up with every property on your street, you will be able to easily drill down and get something that looks like this, which is another issue that was raised when we were talking about the waiving of penalties and fees. This is a person, again, not identified because I redacted information, but this person truly did not get a bill, did not pay by April 30th, but also has not paid for the previous 3 tax periods, and there's more underneath. So the point is, if you want to know if you have outstanding liens, which you may not know, the best place to look is at our website. And it's simple to do. You go to the town homepage, you click on departments, you click on tax, and then you click on tax status. Put in your name or your street name, and you get something that looks like this. Extremely detailed. As a matter of fact, when you click on bill details, which is over to the right, it will tell you exactly what constituted that bill. How much went to fire, how much went to sewer, how much went to town, etc. I included this, a resolution that was drafted but never implemented in February, because in February, if you remember, on the very last day that you could pay your tax bill, there was a terrible storm, basically shut down the roads. Tax office was open, town hall was open, but it was almost impossible for somebody to come to town hall and pay their bills. And this board considered, can we somehow do something for the people who wait for the last day to come to town hall and pay it when you have this terrible snowstorm? And the state legislator decided, maybe we should do something. But in the end of the day, nothing was done. The state legislators decided to drop it. We were basically hamstrung. So even though we had this resolution ready to go, we couldn't do it because, 1, the state legislators didn't act, and 2, there was no way that we could link that snowstorm, to being in the best interest of the tax district. So go down, there's 2 pages twice. Keep going. So one of the options, since you can't use Section 1182 in the best interest of the tax district to do something like this, is one of the things that we could do is we could appeal to the state legislators to pass a bill that would relieve taxpayers in situations like this from having to pay interest and penalties. And I spoke to Assemblyman Tom Avenatti. He's willing to carry such a bill. We would have to talk to the Association of Towns and the Association of Counties to see whether or not they support it. But there is a way to address this, and that's through our state legislators, not through a resolution of the town board. And for that reason, it's why I can't second the motion, and the other board members cannot as either.
First of all, I disagree with your interpretation. On July 19th, we received a memo from the town attorney, and it's a county governing body such as a New York State town waive interest and penalties for late tax payments. Yes, a town or any other governing body can waive interest and penalties for late tax payments so long as a governing body of the municipality determines that it is in the best interest of the tax district to do so. 1182 of the real property tax law clearly states this in unambiguous terms. 1182, cancellation or reduction of interest, penalties, and other charges. If the governing body of any tax district shall determine that it is in the best interests of the tax district, it shall have the power by resolution to authorize an enforcing officer to permit the cancellation in whole or in part of any interest, penalties, or other charges imposed by law to which the tax district or any other municipal corporation shall be lawfully entitled, provided, however, that in cases where such interest, penalties, or other charges, if collected by the tax district, belong to a municipal corporation therein, no reduction or remission in whole or in part of such interest, penalties, or other charges shall be made without the consent of the municipal corporation affected, which consent may be given by resolution adopted after a public hearing. Not only is the law crystal clear on this issue, but the town has relied upon this legal provision in the past in waiving interest and penalties for properties developed for affordable housing such as 112 North Lawn Avenue, Shore, January 22nd, 2020, and 770 Sawmill River Road, Ardsley Housing Development Fund, 11/14/2007. The only requirement on the part of the municipality is that it adopt a resolution authorizing the tax collector to cancel interest and penalties in whole or in part, and that interest and penalties owed to other municipalities not be canceled without their consent. Indeed, if the town could never waive interest and penalties under any circumstances, it could not even correct penalties from a billing mistake resulting in no fault of the taxpayer. Some may conflate the issue of whether a governing body is authorized to waive interest and penalties with whether a municipality is prohibited from waiving interest and penalties. The opinion stated here is that the town board is not prohibited from waiving interest and penalties, but is only authorized to do so if it adopts a resolution and articulates that the resolution, the reasons why it believes a waiver of penalties in whole or in part is in the best interest of the town. If the town board does not believe waiver is appropriate or not in the best interest of the town, it should simply not adopt such a resolution, but it is not prohibited from doing so. Furthermore, the 1967 opinion of the New York State Controller cited by John Kelly of the Office of the State Controller and provided by tax receiver Ann Pavella is inapplicable. The opinion, aside from being remote, relates to a tax payment that was alleged to have been lost in the mail, which is different than the instant case where it is acknowledged that some tax bills were never mailed. Chapter 602 of the laws of 1993 made comprehensive revisions to the provisions of Article 10, 11, and 14 of the real property tax law in relation to the procedures for enforcing delinquent property taxes. Moreover, the 1967 opinion correctly states that where the tax statement timely mailed was not delivered because of misdirection by the post office, penalty for late payment cannot be waived by the control collector. In the instant case, however, the question is not whether the penalty can be waived by the tax collector, but whether 1182 authorizes the penalty to be waived by the governing body, the town board. To be clear, the failure of a governing body to mail any such tax statement or the failure of any such owner to receive the same does not in any way affect the validity of the taxes owed or interest prescribed by law with respect thereto. Nevertheless, under certain circumstances, 1182 authorizes a tax district, including a village, to cancel in whole or in part interest, penalties, or other charges imposed by law. And that's the opinion by the State Controller in 1997, number 97-3, New York State Controller Robert Spencer, Esquire, Village Attorney of the Village of Elmsford. Now, I have one other suggestion. We both disagree on whether penalties could be waived. Town Attorney and I, we think it can. You and some of the other board members feel it can't. Would you be willing, and we wouldn't adopt it today, to adopt another resolution at our next meeting where we would ask the controller to provide us with an opinion on whether we could waive the penalties in the event that there's a computer glitch. And if the controller states that we can, would the town board then second the motion that, that we would, waive, we would provide refunds to those people who have already paid interest? Because your argument is we can't do it. I think we can. I'm pretty confident that the controller will agree with my opinion. But if they don't, then it's a dead issue. If they do, then your argument that we can't do it is not applicable, and then we should all be able to, we could then say to our residents, there's an honest disagreement on the law, and we're going to do whatever the controller tells us to do.
Yeah, Paul, I just want to comment, because I kind of want to put this issue to bed a little bit. And I understand Francis's, reasoning. He's not saying that you can never, ever waive interest and penalties.
That's correct.
He's just saying in the instance where the mail is involved and the taxpayer doesn't receive the bill, you can't do it. And I understand the disagreement.
What I'm saying is that I would like to ask the board if we could write a letter to the state controller, mention that there's a very limited instance where there's a glitch, it's either the vendor or the town, there was a glitch in a mailing, over 1,000 people did not get mailings, there's probably 600 people or so who will get heavy penalties, and I'm asking if the town board would second a resolution that we could work on together, asking the state controller for an opinion, and if the state controller says we could issue refunds, then we would issue refunds to anyone who was penalized. And then there's no, the controller will say they agree or they don't agree. And if they don't agree, then it clears up, then nobody's going to second guess, this in the future. So, is that something that the board would be, receptive to? Because again, there's a lot of people who, are really very upset. They were relying on the tax bills to be sent to them every year. They've gotten bills. They don't pay. They're distracted with the pandemic. A lot of people are not aware about all the features in our website. And, I think that would be the fairest thing. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm saying get a new opinion from the controller, and then we'll do whatever he recommends.
Okay, Paul, I just had one other possible suggestion. So we do know that there's a way to ask the state legislature.
That's correct.
To waive it, and then if the state legislature would agree with us, well, they would probably agree with us if we want it, then we know we would be able to.
The state legislature, my gut feeling is that, because I've talked to lawmakers in the past about the penalties, the odds are that they're not going to pass legislation. So my feeling is the question.
They did it for Mount Pleasant 2 years ago.
Well,
Because that's the way to do it. Mount Pleasant did it correctly.
Okay, so
They
then-
went to the state,
then let
and
me ask the
so
question.
let's ask the state.
Would it be a home rule request, or if the state passes it, would we then refund the taxpayers who were penalized incorrectly?
That's a twofold question on your business. I just want to know what your.
No,
I just want to ask you to finish my question. Are you asking a twofold question, or are you asking one question? Because I get two questions coming out, and I feel like one time
No.
not ready to be answered.
The second question would be asking the state legislature to pass a home rule measure indicating that since there was a glitch in the computer, that we would be asking the state for permission to issue refunds to anyone who was impacted by the glitch. If the state passes that, then we would send a refund to everybody in this way.
Who was affected by the
Not subjective.
The computer is just a very limited thing, or the second thing is, maybe the state controller would find that we can do it, and I personally am pretty optimistic that the controller would find that we can issue the refunds. We could do both, both
Paul,
options.
Paul, I think there's one thing that's really not being mentioned right here at this point. The second part of this is, if in fact we have the authority, is it in the best interest of the taxing district? So all the other people who paid their taxes and paid them on time, they're subsidizing those who didn't pay. And so we have a responsibility to the taxing district, not to individuals. That's the other part of it. There's two pieces, but the other issue about the glitch is it's very hard to determine who was impacted by this glitch. That's the biggest issue that I have, too. That's another issue I
And
have.
who else didn't receive a bill because of something going on with the mail or whatever?
Well,
But
our
the way to
MIS
do it,
department-
the way to do it is by doing it through the state. You read a very lengthy opinion, but I doubt if you're going to be able to tell me any municipality in New York State that took the position that Section 1182 can be used for not getting a bill, which was my point, the state controller's point, the Department of Taxation's point. It's not your opinion versus the rest of us. I gave you very factual information regarding who shares our opinion. We need, if you want to continue this, which obviously you will, share with us what municipality, and you wrote to other municipalities, if they said that they used Section 1182, which means that you think it's in the best interest of the tax district to do something like this, if you received such an email, I'm sure I would have read about it on Facebook or someplace. It just doesn't, I don't believe it exists. And so if you want to do it, let's work with our state legislators and draft something. What Mount Pleasant ultimately passed was waiving it for people who said they didn't have a bill, didn't get a bill. And, you know, that's going to be tricky in order to say that it's in the best interest of the taxing district to do that. But it's worth a try to do it correctly through the state
So
legislators.
you would be willing to then give a refund for the computer glitch?
No, listen, I think if you're going to do it, and in your resolution you say you're doing it because of the pandemic, all those people who we turned down over the last year, stating that, and the one that you just wrote to, who had a neurological disease and couldn't do it, and you said, no, the state controller doesn't allow us, I would also consider them as well. I mean, if you're going to make it your argument, which it is the pandemic was an issue. The pandemic affected an awful lot of people. The pandemic did not affect the software that caused the glitch. People had a result from that, maybe because they didn't get a bill and they weren't used to paying in April. I don't know why not. But I don't think you can really expand this to say it's based on the pandemic. But those are the kind of things that we have to wordsmith.
Would you be open, because one of the other thoughts that I have about, the penalties is, I feel that the penalties for the late payment of the school taxes is really excessive and unfair. And, I also feel that if somebody, we've had situations where people were dying of cancer and they got the penalty. Or somebody was recently, widowed and they got a 12% penalty in January. I'm wondering.
And we said there's nothing we could do.
Right, I'm wondering if.
And we don't set the penalty. Let's make it very clear to the public. We don't set that
But
penalty.
I'm wondering if we could ask for legislation, if you would be supportive, that would give the town more leeway. So if there's real sad situations or hardships, we could set the criteria and then on a case-by-case basis, decide what we would waive and what we wouldn't waive. Is that something that you'd be receptive to? Because
I would have to see the language, because I don't want this to be, the people you know get the waiver and the people you don't. The people who are friendly get the waiver and the people who aren't don't.
Well, it'll be
We need to
okay.
have a very objective standard, which is what we have right now. We use Section 1182 for amnesty, townwide, everybody can apply, or for affordable housing when a property cannot be purchased because of the interest and penalties. The property becomes so expensive, nobody can buy it because the interest and penalties far exceed the value of the property itself. Those are the only two limited circumstances that we use Section 1182 of the Real Property Code. Expanding it now, as you want to do, for people who don't get a bill, when the state controller has said there is no way for us, no authorization for us to waive interest and penalties for people who don't get a bill, that is going to open up the floodgates. And my real concern is that it's not going to be, you say, is it fair? It's not going to be perceived fair, and it likely won't be fair as to who gets the waivers and who doesn't. And that's why we need a very, very clear line as how this works.
Okay,
So I think we did, but I don't think we're going to solve the problem tonight.
okay, so,
So we didn't get a second, right? So that we go to the next, to the
TB1.
next agenda item.
TB1.
Yeah, I do think we should make a statement to taxpayers who have not paid and remind them that, August 1st, penalties and interest, would be increased, and that they should be mindful of that, notwithstanding the fact that there might be a bill in the future and an opinion in the future, just so they understand
and
the
I think Dan
implications.
basically sent everybody a letter this week.
Okay.
But those are only the people that were involved in the glitch. I urge everybody who is listening to this is to go to the town's website, click on department, click on tax department, click on bill status, tax status, and look to see, do you have paid, all the way going down to 2012 or not? And if you don't, it may be an eye-opener, and, it may be something that's already been solved, but then click on bill details to know whether or not there's an issue with payment involving your particular property. The vast majority of the people, I'm sure, are going to go on there and see that everything's been paid and this is great. If you see the word lien, don't panic. Call the receiver of taxes office. Click on details. I'm telling you, it's amazing the information that's on the website. Call the receiver of taxes office to see what can be done about it. Regardless of whether or not we're involved in the glitch or not involved in the glitch, I strongly urge you to do that. We actually need to figure out a way that, and the website can do that, so we're going to have to work on this, is so that we can better put a hyperlink
Yeah, I
to
think he
that
just wants to make sure
document.
it's
But it's 3 key clicks.
Okay. Next.